Welcome to the Eye Opener. I'm your host, Michael Lewis. Texas Democrats have gone off the deep end about the voting reform bills. They've skipped out to Washington, D.C. to avoid voting during the special session. The tentacles of the CCP are everywhere. We're hearing that Beijing might be behind the Cuba Protest censorship and the assassination of Haiti's president. The push to vaccinate is getting intense. A former Planned Parenthood president is calling to make life harder for unvaccinated Americans. The founder of the Life Without Limbs is starting a pro-life bank in response to cancel culture in the banking business. Okay, my friends, let's take a closer look together. After staging a walkout to kill the Republican-backed voting reform bill in May, Texas Democrats have bolted again, this time by actually leaving the state. The large group arrived at Dulles International Airport on Monday. They fled the state in a pair of chartered jets. There were at least 58, enough to paralyze the state house. A special session of the legislature is set for Thursday, and the House will vote again on the two reform measures. With Republicans in control of the chamber, a pass is expected unless they don't have the required two-thirds majority. The Texas Democrats plan to use the time in Washington to rally support for federal voting legislation. They may have to stay away for more than 4 weeks. Now, they didn't want to stay that long, but to block the pending legislation, they have to stay away through the end of the special session, which can last as long as 30 days. The Democrats actually face arrest for this stunt. Under the Texas Constitution, absent lawmakers can be legally compelled to return to work. The Democrats expect state Republicans to track them down with help from the Department of Public Safety. Texas Governor Greg Abbott has already issued the warning.
I can and I will continue to call special session after special session after special session all the way up until election next year. And so if these people want to be hanging out wherever they're hanging out on this taxpayer-paid junket, they're going to have to be prepared to do it for well over a year. As soon as they come back in the state of Texas, they will be arrested. They will be cabined inside the Texas Capitol until they get their job done.
This extraordinary move by the Democrats seems to suggest there's something extremely unusual about the bills. What is about these bills that has the Democrats so rattled? The bill passed the state Senate along party lines. The most important provisions include eliminating drive-through voting, partisan poll watchers will have more access inside polling places, expanding or enhancing at least 16 criminal penalties against election officials who violate voting laws, including restricting poll observers and sending vote-by-mail applications to people who don't request them. Are Democrats afraid of having poll watchers stand closer to the vote tallies, or the enhanced penalties for sending absentee ballots without consent? With the drive-through voting, only Harris County introduced it in the summer of 2020. If that helps disabled citizens who can't walk to vote, Texas already has curbside voting reserved specifically for them. There are some good arguments that curbside or drive-through voting shouldn't include everybody. We'll just have to wait and see what happens to this special session and the truant Democrats. The Biden administration was in fine form on Sunday, responding to the historic Cuban protest against the communist dictatorship. Julie Chung, the acting assistant secretary for the State Department's Bureau of Western Hemisphere Affairs, claimed Cubans were angry over the number of COVID deaths and medicine shortages. She tweeted, "Peaceful protests are growing in Cuba as the Cuban people exercise their right to peaceful assembly to express concern about rising COVID cases, deaths, and medicine shortages. We commend the numerous efforts of the Cuban people mobilizing donations to help neighbors in need." That's absurd. If Cubans were really concerned about the virus, would they protest without masks and no social distancing? It's a straight-up lie. Cuba has been under communism since 1959. Before that, the country ranked among the most developed Latin American nations, with living standards exceeding those of many European countries. But communism changed everything. To squash an anti-communist resistance, Fidel Castro, as dictator, launched a wave of terror. Society is militarized and the economy is nationalized. Cuba is now suffering from the worst economic crisis. On Sunday, the country erupted with protests calling for "down with the communist regime." The State Department's reckless claim triggered intense backlash, notably from Cuban Americans. Senator Marco Rubio, whose parents immigrated from Cuba, condemned the Biden administration for not publicly defending the obvious cause of the protests and slammed Chung for her ridiculous assertion. He said COVID is the icing on the cake because you have a socialist regime with no freedom. Why can't the State Department, why can't the White House just say it clearly? This is not about COVID. This is not about anything else. This is about freedom. Say it. Representative Carlos Jimenez, who was born in Cuba, called the Biden administration totally deranged on Cuba policy. Jimenez said, if you can't make the distinction between a protest over COVID vaccines and a protest over freedom, you're not very good at your job. We think the Biden administration knows the difference, but stressing the consequences of the virus could prompt more people to get vaccinated. It helps their vaccine push. However, some medical professionals apparently think the environment is too gentle for the non-vaccinated. On Friday, former Planned Parenthood president and CNN media analyst Dr. Leana Wen said they have to make life harder for people to stay unvaccinated to meet the target.
So now we have this Delta variant that is much more contagious. Because it's more contagious, it's going to be even harder for us to reach herd immunity. We're going to have to vaccinate an even higher proportion of people to get there. And what we really need to do at this point is to make vaccination the easy choice. It needs to be hard for people to remain unvaccinated. Right now, it's kind of the opposite. It's fine. I mean, it's easy if you're unvaccinated. You can do everything you want to do anyway. But at some point, these mandates by workplaces, by schools, I think it will be important to say, hey, you can opt out, but if you want to opt out, you have to sign these forms, you have to get twice weekly testing. Basically, we need to make getting vaccinated the easy choice. That is what it's going to take for us to actually end the pandemic.
You can tell when said they should make staying unvaccinated an uneasy choice, she didn't sense there's anything wrong with it. One very big problem is many liberal decision makers, policymakers at schools, and in corporations take the overreach of power for granted. They don't see getting vaccinated as a personal choice. They don't acknowledge that there's a large number of people who have legitimate reservations about the vaccines due to the side effects and unknown health risks. If they continue to ignore a person's right to choose, then eventually they'll think it's their responsibility to force people to get the shot. But that's not the American way. It's not something that should happen in the US. Back to the Cuban protest, internet services have become even more unstable across the country. There are reports that authorities shut down the internet throughout Sunday afternoon to limit videos of the unrest. This is where the Chinese Communist Party enters the picture. Though Beijing's involvement has never been officially confirmed, some investigations suggest Cuba uses an internet and phone service system made, sold, and installed by the CCP to give Cuban authorities power to regulate communications. Atesca is the only company in Cuba that provides internet access. A 2020 report by the Institute for War and Peace says the three primary technology providers of the company are all Chinese: Huawei, TP-Link, and ZTE. Another 2017 report by internet censorship watchdog OONI found Atesca's login portal appears to have been written by Chinese developers, as its source code contains comments written in Chinese. In fact, you may be surprised by how engaged the CCP has been in other countries' affairs, including small and less developed countries like Haiti. Last week, Haitian President Jovenel Moïse was assassinated. Interim Prime Minister Claude Joseph said the gunmen were highly trained and spoke multiple languages. He described the attack as an odious, inhuman, and barbaric act. Another official called the assassins well-trained professional commandos. The special force appeared to be foreign mercenaries disguised as US DEA agents. The attack took place on the president's private home at about 1 a.m. The motives remain unclear. However, some overseas Chinese and Taiwanese media are saying Beijing might be in control behind the scenes. Moïse was a 48-year-old businessman with little political experience when he was sworn in on February 2017. He inherited a nation in turmoil, which had gone a whole year without an elected leader. From the time Moïse took office, he faced growing demands from Haitian business leaders to establish relations with the CCP. Haiti is one of a handful of countries that acknowledges Taiwan's sovereignty and maintains diplomatic relations with the island. The CCP, under its One China policy, opposes any recognition of Taiwan as an independent state. Beijing applies extraordinary pressure on other nations that recognize the island. Taiwan News reported that the Taiwan ambassador to Haiti said the CCP once offered the Haitian president lucrative loans in exchange for giving up their relationship with the island, but Moise turned it down, and he visited Taiwan in 2018. In contrast, Panama switched alliances to Beijing from Taipei in 2017 and was rewarded with more than $3 billion in loans and financial aid. And a few weeks before Moise's trip to Taiwan, Beijing convinced Haiti's neighbor, the Dominican Republic, to cut ties with the independent island. And of course, the Dominican got a lucrative business deal out of it. In 2019, a CCP official told a Haitian newspaper, if the Haitian government can uphold the One China principle, the Chinese government is willing to establish normal country-to-country ties with Haiti and enhance cooperation in politics, the economy and trade, public hygiene and education. Beijing could also provide Haiti with interest-free and concessional loans. The CCP officials also held several meetings with Haitian officials to discuss the matter. But the efforts didn't move Moise. Beijing's campaign to win over Taiwan's diplomatic ally, Haiti, fell on deaf ears. If the soft approach doesn't work, the CCP applies hard ones. We can't confirm who ordered the assassination of the Haitian president, but this is what overseas independent Chinese media has been talking about. All countries that recognize Taiwan are Beijing's targets. It's important to realize this fact. Coming up, we have the FBI encouraging people to snitch on friends and family, and we will discuss why motivational speaker Nick Vujicic is creating a pro-life bank. But before we talk about that, I want to take a quick second to ask all my friends watching and the live chat family to please take a moment to hit the like button. Subscribe if you haven't already, but most importantly, share this video. I am depending on you, my friends, and the power of word of mouth to spread the truth. We cannot depend on YouTube to do this. It's up to us. Also, to support the Eye Opener team, please donate to the show or purchase a mug that matters. You can find the link in the description below, and your support, as always, is greatly appreciated. Salute. In a Sunday tweet, the FBI suggests Americans should monitor family members and peers for signs of mobilization to violence and report suspicious behavior to prevent homegrown extremist activities. What are we, in China? The tweet has a link to a government booklet written in 2015 on signs that someone might be considering violence. But the publication mainly pertained to Islamist terrorist organizations like ISIS and Al-Qaeda. The booklet says a history of violence such as domestic violence or violence towards animals and unstable mental state, social isolation or inability to join with or relate to others, and a possession of, access to, or familiarity with weapons or explosives should be flagged. Is possession of firearms or knowledge of firearms an intention of violence that should be closely watched and at some point reported? Former acting director of national intelligence Richard Grenell blasted the tweet, calling it outrageous. He said the FBI has a growing credibility problem, and this type of sinister snitching isn't helpful. Republican lawmakers also condemned the message. Senator Ted Cruz said in both Cuba and China, they also ask children to spy on their parents. True, during the Cultural Revolution, Chinese were encouraged to report family members for counter-revolutionary signs. Examples of husbands and wives turning against each other are countless. Representative Dan Bishop pointed out that the FBI abused NSA surveillance database against Americans, used DNC-funded propaganda to spy on Trump, and perpetuated the Russia hoax. Now they want you to spy on your family. The FBI tweet is likely a response to the Biden administration's campaign against domestic violence extremists. It's clear that the agency is a politicized intelligence tool that services one side. Besides domestic violence extremists, hate crimes are another big focus of the agency that it asks you to report on. However, without an investigation, how is an everyday American supposed to determine whether a crime is motivated by hate toward a specific group? We should target crimes, not hate crimes. Today, financial institutions in the United States are not exceptions to political correctness. Last fall, JP Morgan Chase declared it would refuse financial services to coal producers. Chase started suspending conservative activist bank accounts a couple of years ago. Bank of America launched an effort to achieve net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. During the Trump administration, those two banks, as well as Wells Fargo, BNP Paribas, Barclays, and SunTrust, said they stopped people who work for ICE depository services for no good reason, except for their opposition to immigration. The left has been utilizing financial institutions to persecute political opponents financially. The motivational speaker, who has traveled the world talking about his Christian faith, Nick Vujicic, is starting his own bank. What motivated him to enter the banking business is the insidious cancel culture. In March 2019, Vujicic was questioned by a board member of his nonprofit organization. When would God be using his voice for pro-life causes? Soon he learned that, bounded by social responsibility, most banks give to charities. And a common beneficiary of this funding is the biggest abortion business in America, Planned Parenthood. While Vujicic was praying for how he would be an advocate for pro-life, he got kicked out of his bank with no warning. The bank froze all his accounts and told him that after a review, they didn't want anything to do with him. It was at that time Vujicic was asked to be co-founder of a pro-life bank. His new bank, Pro-Life Bank, will be a for-profit entity and will not fund abortion. Instead, the bank will donate half of the net profits to Judeo-Christian nonprofit organizations. If you don't know much about Vujicic, I highly recommend watching his TED Talk, Overcoming Hopelessness. It's truly inspirational. And that's it for today, my friends. Check out this playlist here for more eye-opening content. You can join me in the Eye Opener Telegram chat room and follow me on Newmaker, Gab, and Parler. Don't forget to sign up to our email list so that we can stay in touch. I'd like to thank you all, and I'll see you next time.